Some nights feel emptier when the room is too bright, like the silence has nowhere to hide. I used to think that quiet meant peace, that the hum of the fridge, the flicker of the hallway light, the occasional door closing somewhere down the corridor, all of it meant the world was still spinning just fine. But over time, the silence started to stretch. It grew long and wide and filled every corner of my one-bedroom apartment like fog. You don't notice at first. You just stop turning the TV on. You forget your playlist password. You eat standing, up by the sink. And then one night you realize you haven't spoken out loud in 2 days. I'm 24, a handyman mostly, fixing things for people who never learn my name. Broken faucets, flickering bulbs, cabinet hinges. They point, I nod, I fix, I leave. And when I come home, I scroll through job listings like I'm flipping channels I already know I won't like. That night was just another one of those. Dinner was instant noodles. My phone was on 12%, but I wasn't really looking at it anyway. I had just folded a t-shirt that didn't smell clean but wasn't dirty enough to wash again, when I heard the knock, not loud, not rushed, just soft, like someone testing the edge of a thought. I paused, unsure if I imagined it. Then it came again. 2 gentle taps. Now I live in a building where no one really knocks. People mind their own business. The walls are thin, but the lives are separate. So I opened the door with the kind of hesitation that only comes from expecting no one and fearing it might be someone. She stood there, wrapped in a loose sweater that looked older than anything else she wore. Hair tied up, but a few strands had escaped. No makeup, not really. But her eyes, they didn't need anything. She looked at me like the moment had been building for hours, and all she said was, "Can I come in?" There was a beat, a silence between us that carried more weight than any explanation could. I stepped aside, and just like that, the hallway light cast a new kind of shadow across my living room floor. She walked in slowly, like she was still deciding if she'd really done it. Like maybe she'd change her mind at any moment. But she didn't. She sat at the edge of the couch, tucked one foot under her. And I remember thinking, this doesn't happen to people like me. Not on a Wednesday, not after microwave noodles. I didn't ask her anything, and she didn't offer anything. There was a kind of mutual agreement that whatever brought her here didn't need to be unpacked right away. Instead, we sat, in silence, with the lights on. But somehow the room didn't feel bright anymore. The next night I wasn't expecting anything. I never do. That's the thing about routine. It trains you not to hope. You stop waiting for exceptions. But there it was again. That same gentle knock. 2 taps. Not loud, not rushed. Like the echo of the night before. I opened the door slower this time. Not from hesitation, but from wanting to remember what it felt like. She stood there again. Same hallway light above her. But something had shifted. She held a bottle of wine. Uncorked. Almost empty. She didn't say anything. Just raised it slightly, like an offering. Then a soft smile. Not polite, not coy. Just tired. I stepped aside again. The door opened a little easier this time. She walked in barefoot. That's what I remember. Her bare feet on the tile. Something about that made the moment more real than words ever could. We sat at my tiny kitchen table. 2 mismatched chairs. No music, no TV. Just the quiet hum of the night settling around us. She poured what was left of the wine into 2 chipped glasses. Didn't ask, didn't explain. Her fingers moved slowly around the rim of her glass, tracing it like it was a familiar route back to something she hadn't felt in a long time. She looked down while she spoke, and I listened. Insomnia. Too many thoughts. A song that used to mean something but now just filled space. She didn't give details. Just moments. And that's how I learned her. Not through stories, but pauses. At Ave Louis. One point, she asked me what I fix. I told her faucets mostly, leaky ones. Ones that don't know when to stop dripping. She smiled at that. A real smile this time. Small. But it reached her eyes. And I realized something then. People don't always want to be asked what's wrong. Sometimes they just want to sit across, from someone who doesn't need the answer. We didn't toast, didn't clink glasses. We just drank. She got up before I could offer the couch, walked to the window, looked out at nothing in particular. Then she turned, her voice almost a whisper. "Mind if I stay again?" I nodded. No questions, no rules. She curled up on the same blanket as before, this time facing the balcony, her back to me. But her presence filled the space between us like warm air after a long winter. And I sat there, still holding my glass, wondering how something so quiet could feel so loud. The bottle had barely enough for 2 small pours, but she poured mine first, and then hers, without asking. Like we'd done it 100 times before, like we'd forgotten how new this still was. She didn't sit right away. She walked around my small apartment, trailing her fingers across the edge of the bookshelf I never use, pausing by the dusty record player I keep meaning to fix. Then she returned to the table and sat down, slowly, like the chair held more than weight, like it might hold a memory. The glass in her hand looked too delicate for that kind of night. But the way she held it, steady, almost reverent, made me feel like it wasn't just a drink. It was a pause, a confession in liquid form. She didn't talk much, but every sip was a sentence, every glance, a comma. And I listened, not with my ears, but with whatever part of me still remembered what quiet longing felt like. I asked her if she ever missed music. Not loud music, just the kind that plays in the background of good moments. She smiled into her glass, then pulled her phone from the pocket of her sweater and played something soft. Old jazz, nothing famous, just a melody that knew how to wait. The room changed, not dramatically, just enough. Enough that the silence didn't feel empty anymore. She hummed along once or twice, off-key and unbothered, and I didn't know whether to look at her or let her be. So I stared at the flickering light through the curtain and imagined the world stopping for just this song. We didn't talk about who we were, or what any of this meant, because it didn't need to mean anything. Sometimes people arrive not to change your life, but to remind you that you still have one. She asked for water before bed. I handed her a glass without speaking. Our fingers touched for a second. Just a second. But I felt it in places I thought had gone numb. She slept by, the balcony again, same blanket, same position, but this time her glass stayed on the table, half full. I didn't pour it out. I left it there, like a reminder that some moments aren't meant to end when the night does. I offered her the couch again that night, not out of politeness, but because it felt like the right kind of distance, the kind that says, "You're safe here, but I know where the edge is." She looked at it, then at the open balcony, and she said nothing. Instead, she grabbed the same folded throw blanket and placed her pillow carefully on the floor, right near where the moonlight pooled. She didn't lie down immediately. She sat cross-legged for a moment, watching the city lights blink and flicker like signals from another life. Her silhouette in the glass looked like a painting half-finished, graceful in posture, but incomplete in peace. I didn't push, didn't ask why the floor felt better. Maybe it reminded her of something. Maybe it reminded her of nothing. Some spaces, after all, are more forgiving than furniture. Some spaces, after all, are more forgiving than furniture. I took my seat at the edge of the couch, close enough to hear her breathing shift, but far enough not to turn it into a conversation. She asked me once what I do when I can't sleep. I told her the truth. I let the darkness talk until it gets bored. She smiled into the night, and I knew she understood. Later, when I turned the lights off, the only glow came from outside. The moon tracing soft silver lines over her body, beneath the blanket. She was curled up slightly, not in fear, but in that way you curl when you want to feel your own heartbeat. I wanted to say something, not romantic, not even important. Just something like, "Good night," or, "You're okay, here," but I didn't. Because sometimes silence is the only language that doesn't lie. I went to bed with a strange ache, not desire, not exactly. It was something softer. The ache of having company and still feeling alone, of wanting to understand someone without the right to ask questions. That night, I stared at the ceiling longer than usual, listened to her breath slow beneath the window, and wondered if she chose the floor because it felt more honest than anything cushioned. When morning came, she was already gone, but her pillow was still warm, and the blanket smelled like jasmine, and for reasons I didn't yet understand, I folded it neatly, as if I was waiting for her to return to the same spot beneath the sky. The third night, she didn't knock. She waited by the door. Her sweater, sleeves pulled past her hands, phone in one palm, a quiet song already playing. I opened the door, and the music slipped in before she did. Jazz, soft, slow, breathy, like the kind you hear when someone wants to remember something without saying it out loud. She didn't bring wine. No glasses this time. Just that sound. And the way she leaned slightly into the frame, as if unsure whether to come in or let the music linger outside with her. We sat at the kitchen table again, though nothing about it felt routine. The bulb above us flickered once. She smiled. "I like rooms that aren't sure what mood they're in," she whispered. Not to me, exactly, but maybe to herself. We talked about everything that never makes headlines, about how some people mistake loneliness for independence, about the strange silence in elevators, about the way old cities don't make space for new people. She asked if I ever felt like a background character in my own life. I didn't answer. Not with words. But I think she saw it in the way I looked, at my hands, or maybe in the way I hadn't changed out of my work shirt 3 nights in a row. She spoke of things she missed. Not people, not places, but feelings. Like being able to laugh without second-guessing, like being touched without being needed. The song looped. We let it. It was easier than reaching for conversation, and in that quiet, I watched her stare at the spot where the wall met the floor, as if memories leaked through that line. Our regrets, mine and hers, sat quietly between us, not asking for air, but taking up space anyway. At one point, she reached across the table, not to hold my hand, but to adjust the candle. Its flame steadied under her fingers. The room smelled like wax and citrus. "I used to think jazz was sad," she said. "Now I think it's just honest." I nodded. Because what else do you do when someone says something that lives exactly where your own thoughts sleep? When she left, she didn't look back, and I didn't ask when she'd return. But after I closed the door, I left the music on, not because I wanted to keep hearing it, but because turning it off felt like saying goodbye to something we hadn't even named yet. It was the smallest thing. A reach. 2 mugs. 1 counter. She was pouring coffee this time, not wine. So her mug she picked was chipped. I never noticed it before, but she ran her finger across the crack like it meant something. We reached at the same time. She for the sugar, me for the spoon. And just like that. Skin on skin. Just the backs of our fingers grazing. No intent. No lingering. But no one pulled away either. The silence grew thicker than steam from the mugs. There was no need for words. The touch had already spoken. It said, "I know. I remember. I'm here." We sat down without really moving, just shifted our weight into the stillness. The jazz was quieter tonight, or maybe it just felt that way. She asked me about my mother. Not with a question, but with a sentence about hers. She used to leave the hallway light on, she said. Even when I moved out, I told her mine did that too. Even now. Even though I live 2 cities away. She smiled at that. Not because it was funny, but because it hurt in the same shape. Then she reached into her sweater pocket and took out a photo. It was creased. Faded. A beach. 2 people blurred by sun. She didn't say who they were, didn't need to. I stared at it for a while, and she didn't take it back. Just let me hold it. Like, trust. That was her way. Not offering details, but letting me sit with the edges. She laughed once that night. Soft. Tired. The kind of laugh that doesn't rise from the chest, but falls from the shoulders. We talked about nothing important, but somehow it felt like everything. Later, as I walked her to the door, I noticed she wasn't wearing shoes, bare feet on the cold tiles. Still, she didn't flinch. Still, she held her chin high. "I like being grounded," she murmured, her voice trailing, off like the steam curling from her cup. I opened the door. She stepped out, turned back for half a second, and touched my wrist again. Not held, not gripped, just acknowledged. It was a goodbye that didn't shut anything down, just paused it, like jazz fading into the last note. And long after the door closed, I could still feel the warmth where her fingers had been. It started with a single sentence. "I know a place." No explanation. No invitation, really. Just the space between her words that left room for me to follow. The night was quiet again, but it wasn't the same kind of quiet that used to press against my chest. This quiet had a pulse. Soft, steady, somehow warmer. Her car smelled faintly of vanilla and leather. Not the artificial kind, but something lived in, like old journals, or memories that still breathe. She drove with one hand on the wheel. The other rested loosely on her thigh, fingers tapping to music that wasn't playing. I sat beside her, watching the road disappear under the headlights, wondering how someone could look so composed and so fragile at the same time. We didn't speak, and it didn't feel like silence. It felt like listening. To the hum of the tires, to the wind curling through the cracked window, to the story neither of us had written yet. After about 20 minutes, the city lights gave up. The buildings faded into trees, and the trees into shadows. She pulled off to the side of a narrow road and turned off the engine. There was no view, not at first, just the dark stretching ahead like a promise not yet kept. Then she stepped out. No coat, no shoes, just that old sweater and the moon hanging over her like a spotlight made for confessions. I followed. The sky was clean, stars scattered across it like secrets finally let go. She leaned against the hood, arms crossed, and tilted her head back. For a long time, neither of us moved. I stood a few feet away, unsure whether to speak or just mirror her stillness. Then, without looking at me, she reached into the back seat and pulled out a thermos. Coffee. 2 cups. She poured without asking. The steam rose between us, and I swear I saw her exhale something heavier than breath. She handed me the cup, and for a second, her fingers touched mine again. Not like last time, not electric, just steady. The moonlight didn't touch her the way the kitchen light did. It made her softer somehow, like the edges of who she was had been sanded down by grief and time. She took a sip, then said, "I used to come here, back when I didn't know what I wanted." And I replied, "Do you know now?" She didn't answer, only looked at me, not directly, but just enough for the silence to mean something. We stayed there until the thermos was empty and our hands had forgotten they were cold. When we drove back, the sky stayed with me. Not the stars, but the way she looked under them, like someone who didn't need to be saved, only seen. She didn't knock the next night. She texted, "Doors unlocked." Just that. No emoji, no name. I walked in quietly, the way you'd walk into a room someone's been crying in. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, near the open window, the breeze pulling gently at the curtains like fingers unsure if they're allowed to touch. A candle burned on the coffee table. Its flame didn't flicker much. Steady, like her. She looked up at me with a softness I hadn't seen before. Not sadness, not hope. Just that middle space people carry when they're still learning how to breathe after drowning. I sat down across from her, not beside, across. Some part of me felt like she needed to see me, fully, clearly. She reached for a blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders, even though the air was warm. There was a pause, a long one. The kind of silence that feels like it's holding something fragile between its palms. Then she said, "Today would have been our anniversary." Her voice didn't crack, but the way she blinked after made me feel the weight she didn't let out. I didn't say anything. What could I say? I wasn't part of that story, but maybe I could help her fold it. She smiled, barely. That kind of smile people make when they're apologizing without saying sorry. I leaned back, let my hand rest on the carpet. Close, but not touching hers. I told her about my father. How he left when I was 12. How I thought for years I'd done something wrong, like maybe if I'd gotten better grades or kept my room cleaner, he would have stayed. She looked at me, really looked, and I saw something shift behind her eyes. Like my story had turned the key to a room she'd locked shut. She reached for her glass of water, held it in both hands, and stared into it like she was reading tea leaves. I stayed longer than I should have, she whispered. But sometimes, leaving feels like failing, even when staying feels like drowning. The room went quiet again, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt held. I noticed her hands were trembling slightly, so I offered her a second pillow from the couch. She took it, pressed it to her chest. There was no hug, no dramatic confession. Just two people, sitting near the middle of their own broken stories, letting the pieces fall a little more gently than before. When I left that night, I didn't close the door all the way. I think we both liked knowing it was still a little open. She stayed again that night. No words, no planning, no questions about whether it was okay. She simply didn't leave. And I didn't ask her to. The couch creaked a little under her weight as she settled in. She pulled the throw blanket up to her shoulders, turned toward the window like she always did. And that was that. A quiet agreement wrapped in silence. I lay in my bed, a few feet away. Not sleeping, just listening. To the slow inhale and exhale of someone who had finally stopped pretending to be fine. There was no music tonight, no whine. Just the faint hum of the city filtering through the open balcony, and the softer sound of two people too tired to keep walls up. I thought about how strange it is, how someone can move through your life so quietly and yet shift the whole gravity of it. Earlier that week, I was repairing sinks and patching walls, killing time between nothing and nowhere. Now, there was a cardigan on my chair, a second toothbrush in the bathroom, still in its wrapper, a kind of presence that didn't announce itself, but settled in like it had always belonged. I don't know how long I stared at the ceiling, but somewhere between the passing headlights and the midnight breeze, I felt it. Not desire, not confusion, just something soft pressing into the space I used to fill with loneliness. She wasn't in my bed. She hadn't touched me. But her being there changed something inside me. It wasn't about having someone. It was about being seen. And choosing to stay visible, even when it hurt. I turned my head slightly and looked over the armrest. She was still awake, her eyes half open, as if caught between two kinds of dreams. For a second, our eyes met. She didn't smile. I didn't wave. We just looked. That quiet recognition again. The kind that doesn't need history or promises. Just a shared understanding that for now, this was enough. I closed my eyes. Not because I was tired, but because I wanted to hold on to that stillness a little longer. And somewhere in the in-between, sleep came. Not heavy, but kind. When I woke, she was already gone. But the blanket was folded, the candle blown out, and on the kitchen counter, a mug I didn't remember leaving there, washed, dried, and turned. Upside down like a silent thank you. Her sweater is still folded in the back corner of my closet. Beige, lightly worn. The sleeves still rolled at the cuffs, like she meant to pick it up again soon. It's been weeks now, and I haven't seen her. Not in the hallway, not at her door, not walking across the building in those soft, slow steps that seem to hush the ground beneath them. But I haven't moved the sweater. It still carries her scent. A mix of lavender, old books, and something like distant ocean air. That night she stayed. The last night felt so unremarkable at first. No heavy goodbyes. No meaningful looks or lingering touches. Just the quiet of two people who needed stillness more than answers. When I woke up and she was gone, I thought it was like the other times. But she didn't return, and I didn't knock. That's the part that stays with me. How easily you can slide into someone's world and just as quietly slide out again, leaving behind the warmth, but taking the weight. Some nights, I still glance at the door, not expecting a knock, but wishing for it anyway. I pass by her apartment sometimes, lights off, curtains drawn, like a scene that's already wrapped for the night. Maybe she left the city. Maybe she just needed that week and nothing more. Maybe what we shared wasn't meant to last longer than that one small chapter. But chapters, they echo. When I wash dishes, I remember the way she placed her mug beside mine. When jazz plays in someone's car passing by, I hear her humming under her breath, so soft it felt like a secret. She didn't break my heart. She didn't take it either. She touched it, brushed past it like fingertips across dust. And that was enough. We never kissed. We never promised. But somehow, it changed me. The way I notice silence now. The way I fold my own laundry. The way I slow down at night, as if waiting for something unnamed to return. And sometimes, when the air gets just cold enough, I unfold her sweater, press it to my chest, and remember the warmth of a moment that asked for nothing but stayed anyway.